I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, coming at you this time. It's a surprise every time, folks, from a Wegmans parking lot after just going grocery shopping on my lunch break. This is the glamorous podcast that I live. I also had to turn the air conditioning in the car off to improve with the sound, and I am sweating so much. It's very gross. Anywho, speaking of sweating, it is spring where I am. And, I don't really know why I jumped to talking about the weather immediately. This podcast is supposed to be like the opposite of small talk, and weather's like quintessential small talk. But yeah, it is spring where I am. And, I guess for me, the weather kind of does dictate my mood. I always feel better when spring is coming around. I always feel more alive, lighter. I have seasonal affective disorder, and I'm from Michigan originally, where, it's kind of only 2 seasons. Spring is barely a season, and fall is barely a season. Like, I can't tell you how many falls I threw temper tantrums because I was forced to wear a winter coat over my Halloween costumes. First world problems. But yeah, I guess I have so much to say about fall. I mean, everybody thinks that it's so pretty with the leaves changing and all of the different colors and the pumpkin and the lattes and whatever. And I'm like, it's dying. It's death. The changing of the colors, it's death. That's what that is. Spring, when things come alive, has always been more of my vibe. So, wow, I digress. Thank you, everybody, for listening to last week's episode and for the feedback on it. I know it was a tough listen. It was something I'd been sitting on for quite some time because I honestly, when do you release an episode like that? It's such tough subject matter. And yeah, I felt like I needed to release it at the right time. And I think I did. So in the episode, I mentioned the crisis text line, and I mentioned that I myself had used it recently. I'm okay. Thank you for the people who emailed or DM'd to check in. I am okay. Sometimes you just need somebody who doesn't know you at all and from the outside. And I don't know, I'm kind of learning the beauty of being in the moment, even if the moment isn't glamorous or happy. And it's good to have somebody to see you through that and to support you through that. And I don't know, I've always been one of those people who really values the connections that I can make with strangers. But I can speak from experience that the crisis text line is, quite amazing. I've used them a couple of times in my life just when I felt like I wasn't going to make it. So highly recommend that. And thank you for those who checked in. But that's kind of actually what I wanted to touch on in this intro was this idea about, I guess, overthinking or unhappiness, which is endemic to the human experience, right? Like, I always used to think very naively that you get your ducks in a row, you get everything figured out, and then you just live. When this happens, you'll be good. When this happens, you'll be good. But bad things are always going to happen, and things are always going to throw you off. And I was talking to my psychiatrist a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, well, next week I want to focus on this, this, and this. And I was like, there's just so many things happening all the time. I don't understand how I'm supposed to work with forward motion and work on these like core issues when there's so many things happening that need immediate attention. And he was like, look, therapy is like swimming in a hurricane. you have to keep swimming even though the things are all swirling around you. And I thought that was a really good analogy. So thanks, Doc. I've also been thinking about, the overwhelming moments that we have in life and the moments of intense negativity and just the secular nature of emotions and of the human experience. I'm not saying anything new here. It's just me pontificating. But I listened to this podcast. This is actually happening. Huge trigger warning for that, literally that entire podcast. But this episode in particular was very, very upsetting. I will link in the episode notes for those who wish to listen. But I felt like I was going to throw up. But the message that the storyteller takes away at the end is kind of similar to what I'm talking about now. This idea that, bad things are going to happen and good things are going to happen, and being able to face those bad things head on and to process them and not avoid them is actually where the true, the true meat of life, that sounds weird to say, but that's where life really is. That's where life happens, is in those moments where you're doing that work when things are hard. And it's funny because when we're in it, we just want to rush through it as quickly as possible. But those moments are so important. And I've been trying to have more gratitude for the hard moments, because arguably those are more important than the easy moments, even though the easy moments feel better. And, and the worst times of my life, I think about how sometimes I'll just go outside and look at the stars, in a bad period, and I'll just think about how lucky I am to be living this human experience and to feel this pain. It's like the Velveteen Rabbit, right? If you're feeling that pain, that means that there's so much love there, so many positive things. And I don't know, I'm just trying to find more. I think I talked about triggers versus glimmers. I'm still on that train of really just trying to find the little glimmers in each day that remind me why I'm happy, that I am exactly who I am, exactly where I am. And I think now, in the past few weeks more than ever, I have more faith than ever before that I'm exactly where I need to be and that I'm learning the things that I need to learn. And I'm honestly happier with myself than I've been in years, at least 2 years. So it's such a good feeling. And I kind of want to know, go ahead and DM me, send me an email. Let me know what kind of hard moments you've worked through in your life and what you learned from them and how you worked through them, what thoughts you had, how you challenged yourself. I want to know. I think that it's not something that we talk about a ton, right? We're told to shy away from that dark stuff or not live there, to try to keep things positive, focus on good vibes, whatever. But we should be really fucking proud of the shit that we've been through. And you know what? I am. So with that, I'm going to jump into today's episode. The amazing Sarah Martin is the guest. We're going to be talking about a phrase that I love, dignified hedonism. I am so excited for you to hear what we talk about. It's really just a fantastic conversation, and Sarah's great. Definitely check out the website. It's incredible, and I wasn't lying. I have talked to Sarah about booking a desire audit at some point and then within the year of 2022. So it's something that I'm definitely going to take advantage of. And I think you should too, because why the fuck not, right? You matter. All right, everybody, I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy my conversation with Sarah Martin.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, an actual play podcast in the game world of Masks, a new generation. Join our heroes as they struggle to build a team and save the city. Can Titan escape the shadow of his mentor burnout? Is Soul's overwhelming power too dangerous to control? Will Muse discover her past? And how does White Knight stomach all those strange snacks? Listen to Delinquent Comics to find out at allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. New issues become available to all citizens every other Monday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited today to be here with my guest, Sarah of, I love the name for your website, The Dignified Hedonist. It's so cool. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Rachel. I was looking forward to this for a while, so I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to talk to you. I mean, anytime that, I kind of like stalk my guests a little bit, I get so excited for whatever we're gonna talk about. So tell me, we're gonna be talking about slutty activism today. Tell me a little bit about your background, who you are, and your history with sexuality, relationship history. I find it's just kind of a good jumping off point to start with you telling me about you.
Yeah, sure. So hi, my name's Sarah Martin. I am a traveling, wandering person who has been fascinated with human sexuality for about as long as I've been making memories. So it's one of those things where you're like, tell me about your history. I'm like, okay, so the story of my life, starting from the beginning.
Yep.
Because I don't know, I don't really remember a time when I wasn't a sexual person. And I know that sounds weird, but like, I masturbated when I was a little kid and stuff.
Me too.
And I didn't think it was weird either. I'm like, this is the best thing. It's very relaxing. Then I go to sleep. It's nice.
Yep.
Anyway, but I mentioned about the traveling piece because that is a big part of who I am. I was born in the United States and I've lived abroad more or less since I was 15. So that really shapes and informs my worldview. And it means I've had the opportunity to be slutty in multiple different countries. So
Dream.
The dream, right? Living the dream. And yeah, I mean, in terms of relationship history, I think in some respects it's quite a relatable one. I, did lots of dating and stuff when I was in high school, and it was very by the book, relationship escalator style relating because I didn't know any better. I was aware I was bisexual back then, but I also didn't feel particularly safe having anybody know that. So I just played heterosexual in my presentation to people. And then I started this traveling thing, and I met somebody when I was abroad for part of uni when I was 19, and I wound up getting married to that person.
Oh, wow, at 19?
Got married at 22.
Okay, so yeah, still though, that's young.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Like, the only thing I really know about 19-year-olds is that they're wrong about everything, and they won't be convinced that they're wrong about everything. So,
yeah,
big empathy for the me from back then.
Of course.
And that relationship wound up ending in a really kind of horrible way. Like, I did some things that I'm not particularly proud of. And a big part of the decline in that relationship was related to sex and sexuality. Primarily, I was trying to initiate sex pretty regularly, and I was getting turned down pretty regularly by my husband. And I grew up in our society that says, like, men always want sex. Yep. And so here I was in this situation where that wasn't the case. And I'm like, oh my God, like, am I defective? Am I disgusting? Am I some sort of nymphomaniac sex addict?
Because of course, because you need to control it, it becomes a what's wrong with me, not, what's going on his end.
Right, exactly. All sorts of toxic crap, which at the time I didn't identify as such. It was just kind of the way things are, right? I didn't question it. The questioning all came after the end of that relationship because I was, oh my goodness, like the amount of shame I felt about getting divorced, about that relationship ending. I felt like it wasn't quote unquote successful because it didn't last for our entire lives. As if length of relationship says anything about the quality or the so-called success.
Right.
That's another story for another day. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey to figure out who I was as a sexual being and to learn how could I be more myself and more comfortable and more at ease in this life. You know, because I did have a period of time too where I'm like, this sexuality inside of me is this like terrifying animal. Like, how do I, you know, like, you know, trigger warning and stuff, but like, how do I kill it? Like, I wondered at some point, like, could I convince a doctor to do a hysterectomy so I just wouldn't feel this stuff anymore? You know,
that's
like,
intense.
Yeah. So if I'm talking about my starting point, like, it was a pretty rock bottom moment then. And that was in that immediate aftermath.
How old were you at that point?
I was 27 or 28, something like that. So late 20s, and like really kind of depressed because I'd been sort of losing more and more of who I was inside of that relationship. It was kind of codependent. It wasn't very supportive of either of us. I think we're both probably in much better places now. And yeah, like, where am I going to go next with this story? So in that sort of chaotic time, I did have a friend who said to me, you should check out this organization called Irreverent Dance. I was living in London at the time. She said, you know, the person who's organized it, they also happen to be polyamorous. They talk about it all the time. Like, maybe they'll know something and can help point you towards people and things to help you learn more about sexuality or other relationship styles. And so that's what I did. Like, I went and I took a class there and I started to meet some people. And that was sort of the beginning of everything that led to the life that I have now, which if you'd told me, you know, back in 2012, hey, you know what, someday you're going to be working as a sex and dating coach and, you know, you're going to have facilitated orgies and you're going to have done all of these workshops, I would have been like, yo, like, who are you and what kind of drugs have you been taking? Because that's just that's so like that. I wouldn't have even imagined that because I wouldn't have even known it was possible to imagine something like that.
Yeah, totally. I can relate to that.
For sure. And I mean, the next big stage of that journey was I moved to Poland, of all places, from the UK, and started, let's see, how did this all work? I also decided, okay, rewind. Before I went to Poland, while I was still in London, still working my corporate job, is when I kind of burned out and decided I want to do something different. And I had the thought, like, I'd like to work in sex. You know, if you Google that, by the way, you get really interesting search results.
Work in sex, yeah.
Right? Yeah, but, you know, we all got to start somewhere, and that was the search string I used. And in my case, I wound up eventually learning that there is a field called sexology, and there is a profession here. And I found an organization. In my case, it was Sex Coach U that I came across.
Yeah.
So I studied and did my certification and became a certified sex coach. And then very shortly after, like right around that same time, is when I moved to Poland and started working at the Sex Positive Institute in Warsaw, which is run by one of my dear friends, Dr. Agata Loewe. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And then also in Poland is where I decided to get involved with the polyamory community for the first time, and also got quite involved in the local BDSM community, and like just this big, wonderful loving, amazing group of people. And you wouldn't immediately think, wow, Poland, this incredibly sexually liberated place, because by and large it's not. But there are pockets of extraordinary people there. And I feel so fortunate that I got to have that journey there. So in Poland, I really got to live and try out lots of different relationship types, and things from like having like a nesting partner, somebody that I lived with, through to having comets, so people that I would see regularly but only like very occasionally, if that makes sense, because they live far away, to friends with benefits, to hookups, to just all sorts, like this big, wonderful, vast circle of people. And that was an amazing period of my life. And then it all wrapped back around. I don't even know how to tell the story of how I met my husband and decided I wanted to transition back to monogamy, though a monogamy that's consciously chosen rather than just assumed, which I can't even express how different those two types are from each other.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Rather than like try to figure out how to put that into a coherent order, that's what happened. That's where I am now. So in terms of like, a speed run through my sexual history, there you go, Rachel. That's the story.
No, that's incredible. And I love too, like, it's funny how many people have such a similar story of, I was in this relationship that felt dead, that felt like, like we weren't having the type of sex. Like I was parched, I guess is like the best word that I can come up with. And there are some things that happen. You can either take it as an opportunity to learn, which, I mean, it seems like a lot of people do, which is fantastic. But there are some people out there who probably don't, and, allow themselves to be consumed by, I don't know, society's expectations or, their shame, whatever it might be. So hearing stories, of people who are able to say, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I want. And then they do the really, really hard work. I think that's incredible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I sometimes wish I knew back then what I knew now, because while that relationship still would have ended, it could have been done in a totally different way. And it's something that I bring through into the work that I do now. A lot of it is around teaching communication skills.
Yep.
And that is what I did not have back then. Rachel, I didn't even know how to even have a productive conversation about, I want more sex, because that's not something women are supposed to do. Like, I'm making giant air quotes, which you can't see because we're talking, but it is a shame that some of these beliefs persist, because they do so much harm in ways great and small.
Absolutely. Well, so it sounds like when you were in Poland is kind of when, I love the term slutty activism, by the way. So it sounds like that's kind of when you entered that, I don't know, quote unquote world of really, like, kind of tell me about, let's dive into that a little bit. Like, how did you start learning about what that was, and try to overcome any fears or negative feelings that you might have about exploring that part of yourself?
Well, that's a big question.
I know.
Where shall we go? Well, maybe loop back around to this concept of slutty activism. That's what I've started calling it now. What I see is as a form of activism that's actually really accessible and fun. But we can talk about that more in a moment. That period of time in Poland certainly was a period with a lot of personal growth, and it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Don't get me wrong here. There was a lot of missteps. There was a lot of reckoning with some of the things you reckon with in the realm of non-monogamy. So having some real challenges around jealousy, where my nesting partner was concerned. And the thing is, looking back now, there were things in that relationship where we also weren't doing a great job of communicating with each other, and where there wasn't necessarily all of the care that I know now that I want to have in my relationships. So again, it was imperfect. And there were a lot of things that, if I had a do-over, I may do differently. And at the same time, that's kind of how we learn. Some of these lessons, wind up being, hard-earned along the way.
Nothing worth having is easy, right?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think there are some things that are worth having and are totally easy. And when you find those things, you've got to cherish them, because every now and then it does seem like it's allowed to be easy.
Yeah, very seldom. I found in my life seldom, but
well, sometimes a good spreadsheet and a Zen afternoon. But I digress. I won't share my fantasies with you right now. So yeah, and in terms of that, I think a lot of the work around releasing some of the shame that was really strangling me when I was in my first marriage, I did a lot of that work while I was still in London. So I started going to the sex positive world meetup groups. That was one of, that was my gateway drug into the realm of sex positivity. And it's hard to express how important those discussion groups and having the opportunity to just meet other real human beings that were living examples that things could be different, how important that was for me. Because prior to going to those kind of events and discussion groups, I didn't knowingly know any polyamorous people or any kinky people or even that many like LGBTQ people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt alone a lot in the before times. And one thing that I learned in London was how to find the people. With time, I got better and better knowing which keywords to search for on Google or where to go to look for kinky events or sex positive events, like where to find others. And over, I'm finding that this is actually one way that I'm often resourcing my clients in our work together is helping them to find the people local to them. And just remembering what it's like in the beginning when you're just like, there's nobody like this around and I'm in a really conservative, horrible like area, et cetera, et cetera. And then sometimes you dig and you go, oh my goodness, like there's this whole community. And then the next step is, well, how do I become part of it?
Exactly.
But step one is just to recognize and to find the people.
Exactly. Yeah. And everywhere. Like that's, I think the beauty of it, is I've always been somebody who talks very openly about, sex, and even when I wasn't having it, I was talking about it.
Yeah.
And I realized over the course of me leading with that type of, I don't know if vulnerability is the right word, but I guess it kind of is, that other people see that and it makes them want to open that part of themselves too.
Yeah, isn't it funny how sex is this lightning rod topic? There's no neutral, the chit chat people do at parties or whatever, where they're like, oh, and what do you do? And, people are expecting like, I'm an accountant or I'm a this or I'm a that. When you go like, I'm a sex coach, it's like you can almost hear the record scratch.
Yep.
And then all the eyes are looking. And it's so interesting too in some of those groups where someone will be like they'll make like a, some kind of indication that they think that that's a bit crass. And then very, like later on the same evening, that same person will pull you aside and be like, can I just ask you one question?
Uh-huh.
And it'll be like, yep, sure. I will be I'll be the channeling rod for your shame. And then hopefully I'll also, crack the door open, shine a little bit of light in, and maybe give you what you need to get started on
Being
your
that
path.
transformational person for them to go. I mean, you can see when somebody, might react that way. You can see the wheels turning in their head, though.
Mm-hmm.
They have that initial reaction because they think they're supposed to, but then you can kind of watch it all happen, and then that person's the person, cornering you in the kitchen when you're trying to get water.
Yeah, we have clearly been to some of the same parties, Rachel.
Yes. Yeah. No. I mean, yeah. It's an interesting world, an interesting place to be.
Well, this is actually a moment to speak up a little bit about what I mean when I say slutty activism, because that's part of it, right? When you start living in a greater sexual freedom and ease within yourself, because slutty activism doesn't have to mean having sex with lots and lots of people. It totally can. That's lots of fun. I've done it. I recommend it if it's what you want to do. So no shame in that. But I think a big part of it is this just having sexuality incorporated into your overall personality and presentation in life, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's why people like me, people like you, a lot of the people I know who are also sex coaches or sexuality professionals have this common story that people always seem to come and talk to me about sex, and not even just when they were doing it professionally as a job, long before that, people always come and talk to me about sex. I think it's because once you've got that, and once you're radiating out that beacon of non-judgment and acceptance, it's very compelling and people recognize it. And I think that's part of how we can change the world with pleasure and with our genitals in a way, is by being living examples of a better way or another way to embrace human sexuality.
That's such a good, I love that. Yes, you hear the term slutty activism and you go, okay, yeah, feeling free to run around and fuck who you want and make out with who you want. And, yeah, sure, that can be part of it if you want. But, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm a slutty activist too, but it's not in that way, really. That's not how I am it was an activism, an activist. I'm an activist in talking about it, right? So that's a really cool way of putting it. Well, your brand is when we're coming down to terms, right? And definitions, your brand, I guess we would call it a brand, right?
Yeah, we can call it a brand.
Dignified Hedonist, which is, I love this, a hedonist with a conscience. I can't talk today. What is happening? But where did that come from? And tell me a little bit about that phrase and what it means.
Sure. So dignity is the piece that was missing to make hedonism everything it could be, I think. So what do I mean by that? I mean the pursuit of pleasure in a way that honors the worthiness of everyone involved. That includes you as well as your potential partners. And that's so important to emphasize because I think a lot of people that I work with, a lot of people who are my clients or come to my workshops, there's oftentimes this really big focus on the other, how do I make sure that they're happy? But for it to truly be dignified hedonism, you got to make sure you're happy too. Mm-hmm. You totally matter in this equation as much as any potential partners do. And for me, that became the way to describe what I actually teach people to do, right? So sometimes when you're doing this personal work with humans, it can feel kind of esoteric. How do I describe what I actually help somebody do? Because it's a pretty big transformation a lot of the time. And you go on these big journeys and they look unique because every individual is unique and has a different story. So when I took a step back and was thinking about how can I describe this to other people, dignified hedonism is where I wound up. And so etymology of the word dignity It comes from Latin dignitas, which means worthy or worthiness. And when I learned that, I was just like, yeah, that's the thing. A big part of my work too is helping people to really embody the knowledge of their own worthiness, because that, I know firsthand how much it hurts when that's missing, and all of the kind of things that you do that wind up being harmful to yourself and others when you don't feel worthy when it comes to relationships, dating, sex, right? Because I didn't feel worthy when I was in my first marriage. And I really didn't feel worthy for a while when I was learning how to date as an adult, because I was so young when I met my first husband, right? Like I was basically totally new to dating that wasn't like dating in high school, which is a whole different thing, right?
Yeah, it's will you go out with me, and then your boyfriend and girlfriend, but you like don't actually see each other like outside of classes.
Right. Or like in my case, will you go out with me? And then like, I don't know, we go bang on logging trails and stuff. Like, but
yeah, that sounds right too.
I grew up in Vermont, so like,
okay.
Flipping away to a logging trail in some boyfriend's car was like, that's the way to have the sex without the parents knowing. Sorry, mom and dad, in case any of you stumble across this podcast. Like I just am who I am, and I'm okay with that. So
yeah, no, I mean that's the beauty of it, right? And our families, I'm very lucky that I have very supportive parents who I've actually done a walk of shame into my house. My mom was like, "How was your night?" And I was like, "It was fucking great." Like, so
that's so sweet.
Lucky to have that, I guess. But okay, yeah. So I feel like there's a question that I have. The beauty of doing a podcast like this, right, is that you get to ask questions about things that relate to your own life, right? Like there's a little bit of a fun, selfish part of it.
Do it.
So, dignified hedonist, the pursuit of pleasure, dignity, about worthiness. And I've always thought about dignity is self-worthiness, but it's also the worthiness of others, right? Like the respect of the worthiness of others.
Absolutely.
And I've been thinking a lot lately about this idea. So in pop psychology, right, we have people who say you need to be selfish. You're not responsible for anybody else's emotions. If something's not making you happy, then you need to leave it. So that's kind of like the pursuit of like, not hedonism, but the pursuit of self, right? The pursuit of your own needs. But then what about when it comes down to the worthiness of others? So, yeah, you can pursue things that make you happy or that you think are right for you. But what if it's at the expense of other people?
So have you got an example? Because I'm wondering if we could make this a bit more concrete. Because I've certainly got a response to what you've said, but I'm wondering if you had something specific in mind.
Yeah, so I guess I'm thinking. So I'm going through a breakup at the time, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about. Like, everybody has to do what's best for themselves, right? But at the same time, like I expect things to be hard. Not the hardest, but I know that there's going to be ups and downs, and maybe that's the way that people approach what they need in a relationship. Some people feel like they are willing to do more of that hard work, or some people feel like they are not. But I've just been thinking a lot in my interactions with a lot of different people about how people, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with like a very concrete example, but it's kind of like this like theme that I've been thinking about, this difference between, it's not even a sexual theme, although it definitely could be, like pursuing your own pleasure and your own passions, but trying to be mindful of the fact, like, I always say, like, I'm not responsible for other people's emotions, right? But that doesn't mean that what I say or do doesn't impact other people.
Right.
And those are two conflicting truths that I'm kind of having a hard time reconciling right now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that and offering some more context. Because it's interesting. And this specific thing about, you're not responsible for the emotions of others. I don't actually think it's contradictory to dignified hedonism. I actually think that that's a really important part of recognizing and honoring the autonomy, especially the sexual autonomy of others. But there are some people who like to wield that like a cudgel to beat people with, in a way. Like, I remember this from my period of life that was very much in the polyamory community and within my own relationships. And I did have a partner who, when I would be sharing, like, I'm not feeling good here, I'm not responsible for your emotions.
That's your shit. That's not my shit. Yeah.
Right. As a way to shut things down. And here's the thing. So dignified hedonism, in my point of view, it's a collaborative process, right? It's like a collaborative project that you do together with one or more people. And the whole idea is, how do we collaborate together for max pleasure? And so to that extent, understanding that, like, I can't make you feel a certain way, Rachel. And we often think about this too in the context of negative emotions, like, you're the one who's making yourself feel angry, or you're the one who's making yourself feel jealous. I'm not doing that to you. But the thing is too, like, I can't make you happy. Like, I can't make you feel anything. That doesn't mean that you don't feel things in response, but it's like, I'm not in control of that. And I think when we step back and we kind of recognize that, that's actually quite a vulnerable thing, because a lot of people, right? I'm just going to do a small sidebar, but I promise it's relevant. A lot of people take one of two approaches to relationships. They either take the kind of like, the advice that you get from your mother, which is like, just be nice, and this place of, well, I'm always just going to do what the other person wants to do always in order to make them happy, and that's how I'm going to make myself worthy of love in the eyes of others, is by just always doing what the other person wants all the time.
I don't know why you're attacking me. It's way too early for me to be personally attacked like that.
That's okay. So, like, here, just bear with me, because there's the other.
No, I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing
okay.
You.
No, it's like, I hear myself in all of these stories. So just to let you know, you are not alone in being personally attacked. I'm also personally attacking myself. So because then the other thing a lot of people do, if they're not from that self-sacrificing perspective and approach to relationships and love, the other side is like the dominator model. And so you see this a lot with like pickup artists, which is like, you set the frame and you control the frame of the relationship. And it's basically like, right. Yeah. And it's like saying, I'm going to get the other person to do what I want always, because then that way I can feel safe and good and validated in this relationship. And the thing is, like, they're two sides of the same coin. Even though they sound like they're totally different, they're both positions of trying to manipulate the person that you're with.
Mm-hmm.
The other path, the middle path, the one that is in some ways simpler, but by no means easy, is leading with the question, what do I want? And with the honesty of your desire. And why people don't like doing that is because it's vulnerable as fuck. Because if I actually tell you, Rachel, what I want, and you say no, then you're actually rejecting like me instead of like whatever persona or whatever approach that I'm taking to try to make something happen. But inside of that vulnerability, there is a lot of power. And it's scary for people to do this the first time, the first 5 times, the first 100 times, right? In my relationship with my husband, when that got started, because that started as a hookup. Like, we hooked up with each other and we liked doing that, and so wanted to keep doing it for a while. And then I noticed at one point, I really like this person. I'd like this to be more than just hooking up. That meant having to have a brave conversation.
Yep.
and going into it with the full understanding, another piece of dignified hedonism, that like he could give any kind of answer. That answer could be yes, that answer could be no, or that answer could be a negotiation. It could be asking for something different. And what I teach my clients and what I practice myself is to always spend a little bit of time preparing before you go and make those asks, because you've got to do some of the work ahead of time to get to a place of like, okay, I can accept any answer when it comes up. And that's one of those things where when you talk about like, how can we be caring of others while still pursuing our own pleasure, part of that is doing some of that emotional work ahead of time, some of that processing ahead of time, and really taking care about that in ourselves before we go out to ask things of others.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is the way. And leading with desire is a huge part of dignified hedonism. And it's a skill that people usually need to practice quite a lot before they feel comfortable and confident doing it. Because, I mean, think about it, Rachel, like how often are we encouraged throughout our lives to just deny our desires and hide them, right?
Daily basis, all the time. Yeah.
And desires big and small, you know, like I've got a toddler right now, and I'm just observing how I am as a parent and looking at some of the classic parenting advice or some of the things that my parents or my husband's parents used to do, like when we were kids. And it's like, you know, I don't want to like make my son eat all of the food on his plate. Why would I do that? Like, what is that going to do? It's going to sever him from his connection to like his true hunger and his actual desire for food. And
listening to his body. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's a big part of it, right? Like desire lives inside of us. So we, you know, we cognitivize it, like we intellectualize it to put words and thoughts behind it. But like a lot of times it is driven by the body and it lives in the body. So that's a piece of it too, is that connection with self and that connection with desire. And these things like that I'm saying don't sound revolutionary in nature. They just
so
sound
hard.
Right. Well, but they are revolutionary in practice.
Yes.
So when you can do this, and again, like just to loop it back around to slutty activism, when you show up on the dating scene behaving in this way, which is so unlike how the vast majority of people behave in their relationships, what you are modeling for all of your potential partners and lovers is a whole different way to be. You're becoming a living example of somebody who's directly communicating their desires and not placing any expectation on outcome. Holy shit. Like, that is a powerful thing to do on Tinder.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And in all of these things, when we have these brave conversations, when we talk to our partners about sex before having sex, like this is a workshop that I've taught to hundreds of people. And it's so interesting because people have the same fears wherever they are in the world, no matter how old they are. Isn't it going to kill the mood? Like, it might make things awkward for a moment, but then it like makes the mood like 100 times better. Plus, when you do it, each time you do it, every new partner you do this conversation with, you give them a model for how to talk about sex before having it, which they can then take and have those conversations with their future partners, and on and on and on. It can make this massive ripple effect, because I think so many people mean well when it comes to dating and sex, and they deeply desire pleasure, and they don't want to hurt anybody. Like, they want the dignified element of it too. But where are the role models, right? Where are the people? Like, where are the examples? Who's teaching this? In the broad, like, you know, I know who's teaching this because this is my world and this is my life. Right. But if I'm thinking about the average person, or if I'm thinking about who I was at the beginning of this journey, I didn't have a freaking clue, right?
Yeah, it just takes, it's all about experience, right? It's all about experiences and listening to those desires.
Yeah. I mean, and for anybody listening to this, if you're wanting somewhere to start, like spending time checking in with your desires, like put it as an appointment on your calendar. Like I have clients actually do this, that like once a month deliberately schedule in a block of time that's going to ping up where you can check in on your desires and see, do you still want the same things you wanted a month ago? Because that changes too, Rachel. It's dynamic. It's not like one and done. You figure this out and okay, great. I know who I am as a sexual being from now until I die. Sadly, no. Like it's not fixed.
That would be nice.
Well, I say that as if it would, but then would it really?
That'd be boring.
Yeah, I think, I kind of err on the side of if we never changed, if we didn't have this dynamism as humans, I think we probably would get rather bored rather quick.
I think so. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think that the desire, and maybe not everybody is like this, but it seems like, you and I and a lot of people in the field are, this desire to understand the deepest part of yourselves is like the driving force in life.
Yeah.
And like, if you learned it all, what's left?
Well, that's part of why I love being a sexuality professional, though, because it's impossible to know
so
everything.
Many things. That's true.
It's infinitely vast, and so therefore, I know things will stay interesting and new and dynamic for as long as I do this work.
Yeah. Well, when you work with people, tell me a little bit about like obviously I know that you can't share. There's some things that, have to be private, but tell me about some of the work that you do with people and how you approach it. Like how, if there are listeners out there who are struggling with being able to be in touch with that. I mean, you just gave a great example of, putting time on your calendar, but what's some work that you've done with clients and overall like advice that you can give to people who are curious?
Yeah. So I work with people in a variety of capacities. So I run workshops, I run groups, and I do one-on-one coaching journeys. And the work looks a little bit different inside of each of these containers, and the focus can be a little bit different too. But I mainly work with my Dignified Hedonist framework. Haha, like there's that name again. And there's more or less 9 different steps, so 9 different areas that we look at in our work together. And so thinking about a couple that I could share with your listeners today, one thing I have people do really early on is date themselves. And this, like, to simplify it, like, what do I mean? I mean, treating yourself with the same amount of care that you would treat yourself with before going out on like a really hot date. Because, right, have you ever done this? Like, you're going on a date with somebody you're really excited with. And what do you do that day? You might take a longer shower. You might use better shampoo. You might dress in clothes that make you feel really amazing and that look beautiful. And you might spend more time on this grooming and bodily self-care than you would on an average day.
Right.
Right. Well, part of my encouragement is to get ready for yourself every day as if you're about to go on a hot date. And these kind of things, right? Because when we talk about worthiness, and if I think about me back in the day and I'm like, how the hell do you feel worthy, right? Is a question I would have had back then. And the answer is kind of simple, because again, simple doesn't mean easy, but simple is like good because it means it's doable.
Right.
Simply put, you are giving yourself data. You're sending yourself signals every day about your relative worthiness. So are you giving yourself enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating food that makes you feel good? Are you getting in some movement that feels good? Are you caring for your body? Are you being gentle and compassionate with yourself? Like all of these things, like they're not esoteric and they're not these abstract things. It's like very concretely, how do you behave towards yourself every day? And that is like information you're giving your brain about am I worthy or not? So dating yourself too, in addition to like getting ready for yourself, I also include in that like doing some 4-course masturbation is what I call it.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, well, it is. It's kind of like setting aside, 45 minutes, like a nice big chunk of time, and like getting the mood lighting going, lighting some candles, getting a variety of toys and lubricants at your disposal, having different erotic materials. So that could be audio erotica, that could be written erotica, that could be porn, that could be erotic art, like whatever gets your motor running. Like to basically take masturbation and dial it up to 11 rather than having it be this like rushed 5-minute quickie right before bed, which
I need to fall asleep. Yep.
Right. But no shade on 5-minute quickies. Like those are also great. And
Absolutely.
taking time to really like go to town on yourself sends yourself a powerful message about pleasure and about how worthy you consider yourself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I mean, hey, you're releasing the oxytocin, but in addition to that, like, I think about the amount of time that I take, like the first time that I'm having sex with a partner, the amount of effort that I put into teasing or like, pulling out all of my tricks or whatever, right? Yeah. It's like, well, why wouldn't I do that with myself? Like, why don't I? And that's so funny because that's exactly the same advice that, I have spoken with a few people who are people with vaginas who are uncomfortable masturbating. And, I understand that. I think that, it goes back to that shame piece. They, I don't know, have a mindset shift that they are trying to work through. And I think a big part of that is just you are worthy of being able to give that to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that end, I mean, thank you for bringing that up too, because you might hear me talking about 4-course masturbation and go like, oh my God, that sounds so uncomfortable. And part of dating yourself, part of being a dignified hedonist, wherever you are in that journey, is really honoring where you are and being compassionate with yourself. So you don't have to rush any of these things. And in fact, you ought not do so. Like pushing yourself is not the point. And it is possible to be gentle with yourself and go at your own pace. Like that, like when you do that, you are showing yourself you're worthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're worth taking the time and you're worth the effort and the checking in with yourself. I think that's a big thing too. It's always checking in.
Absolutely.
That is so cool. Well, what are some other things? So 4-course masturbation, what's another?
Okay.
I know that you do like a desire audit too.
Oh yeah. Well,
interesting.
So yeah, desire audit kind of connects to this defining your desires piece of the framework that I use. Because what I find is a lot of people have pretty vague desires. So I might have a client say, I want a girlfriend. And so then I go, why do you want a girlfriend? And at first they look at me like, a duh. And I'm like, well, no, a duh. Like, why? What do you actually want to experience with this person? What would you look forward to experiencing with this person? How often do you want to meet each week and for how long each time? And when you meet up, how much of that time do you want to spend in conversation versus doing shared activities versus having sex? And it's so interesting because so a desire audit is basically a laser focused session where all we do is I ask you a lot of really good, tried and true tested questions to help you take your desires and make them really concrete. Because to find people who want the same things you do, you first have to have a good idea of what you want. And I know that sounds really simple. And I know a lot of people listening will be like, oh, but I know what I want. Yeah, but do you? Like, how concretely do you know in some of these practical details? And I will tell you.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Well, so I will tell you, Rachel, like, I have done so many of these. And it's so interesting because sometimes people say the same vague thing at the start, like, I want a girlfriend, or I want to be able to have hookups, or, I want to find somebody for a long-term relationship who wants to have kids. Just taking like 3 different ones that come up again and again. But then you drill into the details of like, what do they actually want to experience with the other person? Like, what does it look like in active day-to-day interactions as opposed to these more abstract ideas? And what people want is so different. Like taking this girlfriend example, because this one is just like probably the most common one. For some people, that means somebody that they see twice a week for 2 to 3 hours each time. For other people, they want to meet up 5 days a week, for 4 hours each time, and like at least 2 overnights, and that different set of expectations and desires is more set of desires. When you're just going out there saying, I want a girlfriend, well, the 2 types of people those 2 individuals would be looking to meet, where they would have compatible desires, are so totally different, right?
Yeah, and that's not to say that when you do meet, like, you can't compromise, right? But you should have an idea of what you want and what you need going into that compromise conversation.
Well, absolutely. And it also matters a lot. Are you looking for monogamous or non-monogamous relating? And if so, what does that actually mean to you? Because it's not only a matter of, of course, because when you're meeting human people, this isn't about making a laundry list of like, here's a checklist of all the things this person needs to meet. No. Like, that's not the point. The point of defining your desires is to, number 1, help you communicate those to others so that they can check that they actually want the same things you do. Because that's where the magic lies. When you're with somebody who wants to be there, who wants to be doing what you want to be doing as much as you want to be doing it, like, whoa, like, that's magic. That's pleasure. That's hedonism.
Yeah.
But also, it helps you to pick the right context to go looking for partners. And this is a lesson that I teach. So I guess is one more thing I'll throw out here for listeners too. So like, let's say you want to buy a hammer. You might be able to find a hammer at the grocery store. Some grocery stores have a homeware section and they may have a hammer there. You could also go to a hardware store where you can be almost certain they will have hammers, and not just one type of hammer, but maybe 20 different types of hammers for very specific jobs. And that's what I mean, like, about context. So if you just go to a bar on a Wednesday evening, there may be some single people there or people who are available for relationships. There may also be lots of other types of people there, and who is going to be there on any given night compared to going to a speed dating event at the same bar a week later, where it's a much more specific context, where you're much more likely to find people. And same, like, if you want non-monogamous relating, don't go look for that on Hinge because the people on Hinge are there specifically because they only want monogamous relating. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good example too. By knowing your own desires, you are going to have a good sense of where you can get those desires met.
Yeah, and it saves people a lot of time.
Yep. No, 100%. That's great. Well, I guess, is there any other like last pieces of advice before I have you kind of talk about where people can find you?
Last pieces of advice. Oh my goodness. I mean, I could give advice all day long. I think, like, maybe I'll end with that Bill and Ted advice to just be excellent to each other, right?
Oh, yeah.
we're all here for such a short time, all having these challenging and disorienting and kind of weird experiences as humans in these ever-changing, sometimes frustrating human bodies. Like, the more kindness we can bring into the world, I see that as a big piece of slutty activism too, that when we can radiate out kindness and compassion towards others, we make the world a better place.
Absolutely. No, amazing. I think that's couldn't have said it better myself. Well, yeah, where can people find you? This is your time to kind of just let people know where they can not meet up, because I mean, pandemic, also you're not where a lot of people are. So
though hopefully, like, fingers crossed, because you never know what's going to happen with the panini, but I'm hoping to do some actual real live events later this year. And if you want to hear about those or hang out or learn how you too can become a slutty activist, the very best thing to do is go to my website, dignifiedhedonist.com. And right there on the homepage, you can sign up for the Slutty Activism newsletter. So I love communicating by email. I am on all the socials. I'm super lazy about, like, I will post stuff from time to time on social media. I hate it. So like, I want to get the knowledge out into the world. So yes, I do go in social stuff sometimes, but the best way is come sign up for the Slutty Activism newsletter, and I share the very best that I have to offer there. And I also have my peeps on the inside, like, get first access to any events that I'm doing, and occasionally, like, all the best pricing will always be to the mailing list too.
Amazing. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I mean, I'm always over the moon when I feel like I have learned something, and I'm lucky enough that I learn something new every time that I talk to somebody. So thank you for the wealth of knowledge, and for sharing your story. And I hope people find you on the internet and sign on. I know that I definitely am like, ooh, maybe I'm going to get myself a Desire audit for my birthday.
Yeah, well, there you go. Treat yourself, right?
Exactly. So
thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
Of course. And I love that you sign all your emails to your pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, and thank you for listening and being here today. This has been Wine, Dine, and 69. I'm your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.